Hello and welcome back to another episode of Soccer Supernova, a State of Mind's dedicated football chat show. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by, there's no other way of putting it, a Motherwell legend. He's a current assistant manager as well, Keith Lasley. Keith, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, pleasure to be here. Yeah, decent start to the season and a nice, easy game on Saturday to keep that going, hopefully.
Absolutely, God, it will be easy. There's no denying that. Just before we came on air there, obviously everybody knows you from your position as assistant manager at Motherwell, but you're dabbling your hand into something else right now as well, aren't you?
Yeah, as I was saying before, there just off camera before we started, I've started a master's degree for my sins in sports directorship. So, something I'm possibly interested in further down the line. Something that I've looked into a little bit over the last period, and yeah, so it started in September. It runs for 2 years. So yeah, see how it goes. The assignments are starting to roll in, so that's keeping my hair as grey as ever. And but I'm looking forward to it. Some good people on the course, and should be hopefully beneficial moving forward.
Fantastic. No such thing as a day off then. So let's get started. We'll go right back to the very beginning. Where did the love for football for you really begin? I heard you were a bit of a black sheep in the family.
Yeah, that's true. In terms of who I support, is my dad's a Scouser, so a lot of background. Spent a lot of time in Liverpool as a youngster, really. Any school holidays and things like that were always spent down there. So yeah, Liverpool played a big, or Everton in my case, but Liverpool, the city, played a big part of my childhood. So those two clubs, really, Everton and Liverpool, were always prominent in my household. My two older brothers and my dad, big Liverpool fans, and myself, being the black sheep of the family, as you mentioned, being a big Everton fan. And at that time, some people might think why, but at that time, Everton were the best, or certainly them and Liverpool, but Everton had probably the best team they've ever had in the mid-80s when I was just kind of getting into football. I was 6 or 7 at that point. So, they won the league, Cup Winners' Cup, and if it wasn't for the European ban for English teams, I'm pretty convinced they'd been on and went pretty close in the European Cup with the team that they had. So, yeah, that was my kind of my hook into football. Stayed with me since. I've got a young son now that I'm trying to keep the Everton line going, but it's getting harder and harder over the years. That's certainly been a bit up and down Everton over the years since. But so yeah, my first love of football really is through Everton, and as I say, going to the games when I was younger and out kidding on or trying to emulate guys like Graham Sharp and Gary Lineker and Andy Gray. That was my kind of first memories.
So when you're on the pitch or the park at that stage, where would you find a young Keith? Was it boys' club level playing your game?
Yeah, that and out in the street, really. Two older brothers, as I said. So it was really, that kind of cliched thing of out, get the jumpers down, the goal posts, and, a big, whatever it was, 13-a-side game with you and the rest of the street. It really was like that. Straight in from school, dump the bag, straight out, kick a football about in the street. So that was pretty much it. And then obviously as you get older, you get into a bit more organising through boys' club football. So from Erskine originally, and played for the kind of local boys' clubs in Erskine, Parkmere Boys Club, Erskine Boys Club, and loved it. Loved everything about it. So yeah, still obviously got really close friends from growing up, and a lot of those friendships were really formed playing boys' club football.
Obviously, it took you quite a while to really break out at that level compared to perhaps maybe you would say the normal sort of age gap. Do you think then that maybe helped you? If you just developed the love for the game, there was no sort of like academy sort of standards, and you were just playing with your pals.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a pretty topical point as well. I think there's a lot to be said for that in terms of how young the clubs are now taking the boys and girls, which, for me personally, I think it is too young. I think there's a lot to be said for, kids playing a lot longer, playing in inverted commas of just going and enjoying their football till an older age. And not to say the academies aren't enjoyable, but I think, I think that range certainly should be moved further back and a little bit older. But going back to my own situation, I think what it did do was give me a real appreciation for football and being involved in it. I left school to be an electrician, got to serve my apprenticeship, and that, along with, as you say, kind of just playing boys' club football for a period longer. When I get into professional football, it just gave me an appreciation of just being involved in it. That was my job. All of a sudden, it was strange to me at first, to be honest with you, to actually be doing it for a job. But it did give me a kind of underlying drive to stay involved in it and really make the most of my opportunity.
Did you manage to finish your apprenticeship?
I did. At the second attempt, I failed my first trade test, which anybody that knows my electrical capability or seen it recently would fully appreciate. No, listen, it was funny, the timing of it, because actually getting into my chance to get into Motherwell, it was Billy Davies who used to train my boys' club. That was the link, really, of getting me up for a trial at Motherwell. But he was kind of desperate to get me in and get me up to have a look at me. But I was determined to finish my trade test. So as impatient as Billy usually was, he was kind of on at me, like, what's happening? And then, of course, I had to give him the phone call to tell him that I'd actually failed it the first time and had to wait 2 or 3 weeks to get a reset. So that didn't go down too well. But yeah, again, these things and that experience, just again, I still think back to it at certain points, certain moments where you think you're maybe going through a tough time or whatever, and it goes back and it just gives me a real appreciation to still be involved in football to this day.
Obviously, you touched upon it there, but just talk us through how great an influence, obviously, Billy Davies was in your career, really just kick-starting it.
Yeah, listen, in simple terms, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be sitting here right now talking to you and doing, and as I say, just being involved in football for so long as I have, continue to do so. He's the only reason I got a chance in professional football. It's as simple as that. And again, it was just really through chance that he I think through getting his own little bits of experience in coaching, started taking our boys' club kind of once a week. And it's just amazing how these things work out. And through that, then, obviously seen something in me to then get in contact with me when he got the Motherwell job to ask me up for a trial. So again, real kind of sliding doors moments and timing and a little bit of luck and all these things rolled into one. Ultimately, got me that chance to try and earn a contract at Motherwell.
Which obviously you've done so, and it didn't actually take that long for you to then make your debut. It was a little bit of a baptism of fire at Ibrox, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very much so. Again, I was still staying with mum and dad at that point. I remember Billy phoned my mum and dad at night on the Friday night, and yeah, once that news was relayed, it was I didn't get too much sleep that night. I don't think. Thinking back to that time in 2000, it was Dick Advocaat's Rangers, pretty kind of awesome team at that time, to be honest, in terms of the spending power and the sort of internationals they had in their team at that time. I think off the top of my head, going back to playing in midfield, like where I played, guys like Alberts and Van Bronckhorst and Claudio Reyna and Barry Ferguson, and the list goes on. So yeah, for a kid that's just been on a building site a few months earlier to be walking out at Ibrox and looking across the tunnel at these guys, it was a pretty awesome experience. And my underlying feeling after the game is just of absolute exhaustion, exhaustion in the body, but exhaustion in the mind, because I was just absolutely shattered. Because I remember doing okay in the game. I think we lost 2-0 from memory, but I remember we played okay as a team, and in some ways a 2-0 loss back then at Ibrox wasn't too bad a result, to be perfectly honest with you. But I just remember being shattered and delighted that I'd made my debut, but equally just shattered after the experience, So, but my debut is just one of those things. Again, just kind of final point on it is I've only got 2 shirts up, and that I really treasure mostly,
Yeah.
and one of those is my debut shirt, and I've got it up in my house because it just means so much to me. Just to, again, just something that I never ever thought I'd get the chance to do is to play professional football and to make my debut for Motherwell and make it at Ibrox, and just the occasion it was. It's just something I'll always cherish.
You talk about obviously who you're lining up against, but it's also who you're playing with. So being a young guy, obviously from the background, already coming in rather late, but rather amazingly, how much can you learn from the experienced guys? For your first few seasons, you've still got the likes of John Spencer, Don Goodman, Andy Gorham. You've got to be able to pick something off those guys.
Oh, loads, and sometimes it's actually not even maybe advice or them pulling you to one side. It's just watching them,
Yeah.
just watching them train every day, their standards, their quality, just to see that. And it was almost, I had a lot of kind of imposter syndrome for a long time. I felt as if I was like, what am I doing here? These guys are miles ahead of me. It's true. It's just I'm not doing that to put myself down. But it was just, I just always thought these guys I'm never going to be as good as these boys, or these guys. It was hard for me to visualize myself becoming even close to them. But at the same time, it was really inspirational just to see them, as I say, training every day. So the Brawl was great with the young lads, not just myself, but there's a few young lads that went on to make their way through into the first team, like some Stevie Hamill and Stephen Pearson and David Clarkson, James McFadden, all come through at a similar time. And I think they would all say the same thing, that these guys, experienced guys that were in the dressing room, were real, a real help to us coming through the ranks.
I could be wrong, but it's almost at that time you maybe didn't have the most confidence in your own ability or in yourself. So what does it feel like, when a guy who's put all his faith in you, like Billy Davies, and really granted you this opportunity, when he leaves?
Yeah, it's difficult at that time. You get used to that, I think, more as you go through your career, because it's part and parcel of football. Managers come and go, but at that point, I wasn't used to that. So it was very the unknown, really. You just don't know. Again, from myself at that time, I wasn't sure how long football would last for me anyway, to be perfectly honest. I always felt as if, always at the back of my mind, I felt as if there was a chance, look, I could be back doing what I was doing, in a year or a couple of years' time. I never ever envisaged, certainly at 42 years of age, still being involved in football. I didn't have that in my mind. I thought it was maybe just look, if this works out, I'll probably back in the building site in a couple of years. And again, I'm not saying that to put myself down in any way. It was just a fact, to be honest. So when Billy left, I didn't know what really to expect, and just kind of go with the flow and see what happens. Luckily for me, I obviously went on and progressed and did make my way into the team and become a little bit more of a regular. But it is a worry when the person that's brought you to the club moves on. There's no doubt about that.
So Eric Black and Terry Butcher come in on the brink of a tricky time, a tough time for the club. What were they like as a pair?
Great, to be honest, and I think a little regret looking back. Don't have many regrets in my time at Motherwell at all, to be honest. But one of them is that never quite got the chance to flourish, that partnership, Eric and Terry, because I think it would have been a really, really good one. I think the club got into administration and had an effect in that, and Eric obviously ultimately ended up leaving, and Terry took over and did a fantastic job. But it's always one thing I look back on, and I just wonder what that would have been like if that had get given a chance, a longer time, because I think the two of them were, and I probably liken them to Craig Brown and Archie Knox further,
Right.
Later on in my career. It seemed just a great relationship between them, two of them, real kind of good cop, bad cop, almost that classic mix. And yeah, I think that it's a shame that they never quite got the chance to work together for longer.
What was it like as a player at the time that the club was obviously going through administration?
Yeah, that was tough. It's again a bit of an unknown. I was obviously still young at the time, me and the kind of other younger players that I've mentioned, and you don't really take in the full scale of it at the time. It's probably only a reflection. You think, you realise that how close maybe the club was to going under, or you just don't know what's going to happen. But at the time, you weren't really sure. And I just remember we got an appointment. We get taken into a room one day, and it was it was pretty much you keep your job or collect your stuff on the way out, sort of stuff. So it was pretty brutal. And at that time we were young players. We weren't earning a lot of money, and ultimately for us, it worked out. Well, it's hard to say it worked out well in a situation like that, but we got to keep our jobs basically, and unfortunately, a lot more of the experienced ones had to move on to cut costs. So ultimately, at the end, did the club benefit in terms of some more younger ones coming through in the subsequent years? Probably, but it was still a really tough experience for everybody at the club to go through.
I was just going to say that, your McFadden's, your Pearsons, yourself, you guys coming through during that tricky time then, because obviously the older, more experienced player, as you would say, obviously they moved on, so it allowed for your development. Did you feel that you were almost, like the bright light during the dark days then?
Um, Again, probably maybe on reflection, yeah, but not at the time. To be honest, not at the time. You're just kind of getting on with it. You got a job to do, and and Terry kind of leading the club through that situation. Difficult. What must have been a really difficult situation for him to manage. Actually, we just wanted to do a job, and we're just delighted to get the opportunity to do the job and be out there playing for Motherwell. And listen, with Terry and us young guys, it was a case of telling us to jump. It was a case of, well, how high. We just wanted to please him and do a great job, as good a job as we could for him and for the club. So we just kind of got on with our jobs, to be honest with you. But as you say, so again, it's maybe further down the years, you look back and it's one reflection that you really think, God, that did really give all of us a real good opportunity to come through at the one time. And ultimately that is what it did.
Yeah, and the other side of things as well, the well worth saving campaign, which is obviously led by the fans. As a player, or right now, everybody is so focusing in and really giving plaudits to the Motherwell fans and how well run the club is right now. But back then, as a player, you must have really, or did you appreciate how good the set of fans were to you, because that was an incredible campaign.
Yeah, it was incredible. And again, the honest answer to that is probably no, not at the time. Not at the time. You don't. There's an effort from the fans to stick together as we always do at Motherwell. But at the time, again, as a young player, I don't think you do really have a real appreciation for how much effort and coordination and this is pre-social media and all that. In terms of just coordinating, getting enough support together and people together to really get as much support behind the team and financial support as we could. And looking back and reflecting on it, it doesn't surprise me. The way our club has stuck together through some tough times over the years, and through the Welsh society now, runs our football club, and our football club is really about our community. It's not just about the football; it's about Motherwell and Lanarkshire as a whole, and improving the lives of people in our community. It's only now being a member of the club, if you like, for such a long time, that I do, you just grow such an appreciation for the people's efforts over the years. And I've got a real sense to that now. But at the time, as I said, we were just solely really focused on doing our jobs and doing them as well as we could.
Absolutely, and obviously towards the end of your first stint at the club, you really were a mainstay within the side. So, did you want to move away? Was it something that was in the back of your mind?
No, it wasn't really, to be honest. It was, I think, again, looking back on it, I just think what happened was really a chance that I never thought I was going to get, a chance to play in the English. It was actually the inception of the English Championship, the first year of the English Championship. And again, I think it probably goes back to that feeling of that imposter syndrome of I never ever thought I'd, get a chance in professional football. Then I never ever thought I would really have any longevity in it. And then all of a sudden somebody saying, "Do you want to come and play in the English Championship?" And I was like, "Hey, this is weird." I didn't think I was ever going to be kind of good enough to get a transfer in football or whatever. So I think all that added together, it was just kind of the opportunity I felt that I couldn't knock it back, And again, was it a great move for me? Ultimately, nah, probably not. I mean, I still maintain I came back a better player, a better rounded player, better for the experience of moving away. But did it go perfectly for me? Was it the right decision? Possibly not. But at the time, I think I'm pretty sure that was the reason that I ended up deciding to move down to England and give it a shot.
It was obviously the newly formed championship at that time. So, what differed from the SPL? The standards, perhaps, or just the level you were really at?
Um, I mean, there was some big teams in it at that time. I remember West Ham and Sunderland and Leeds United. The thing, some massive clubs. So it was a great experience. I mean, the big thing in terms of the football itself, I'd probably say, is probably the physicality. As somebody's, not the biggest player in the world physically, it's something I did notice across the board that every team pretty much always had that level of real physicality and this athleticism. And this is what, 2004. So you're probably talking 15, 16 years ago that, I think we've caught up pretty much a little bit in Scottish football in the intervening period in terms of sports science and the way players look after themselves and nutrition and all the things that go with that. But at that time, I felt as if there was a gulf between Scottish football and English football in terms of the athleticism of the players, really.
You're talking about like West Ham, Leeds United, Sunderland, massive clubs. And considering you had such a fondness, obviously, for Everton growing up, was that something quite special? Leeds in particular, it's a massive ground at Ellen Road. So you're getting to almost like tick all these grounds off.
Yeah, it was. And that's, again, get back to the decision to go. It was probably a little bit of that in there as well, in terms of, again, never think you would ever have the chance to actually play at these grounds. It's so there was a little bit of that in there, and it was a great experience. Remember going up to like the Stadium of Light up at Sunderland and West Ham. The old West Ham ground was
Yeah.
great. Upton Park. So and it is, and it's just different, just a different, different venues. That's the one thing about Scottish football. It can be repetitive. You're obviously playing each team, 3 and 4 times a season, and you kind of get to know them inside out. So in terms of that side of the experience, it was really good. And what wasn't so good was the bus journeys from Plymouth to go to these places, which, geographically, if you know where Plymouth is, it's everywhere.
That's right.
Pretty much. So, that was a challenge, but it was good to actually go and play at some of these grounds.
Tony Pulis is obviously a fairly iconic English Premiership manager, English Championship manager as well. So he didn't really see you in his plans when he came in. So how tough a time was that?
That was tough because, again, it was a bit of a crossroads moment. You just think, right, what is happening here? To be fair to Tony, and again, once I've come into coaching and this side of the game, I got a real appreciation for how honest he was with me, really. Some managers you need to try and read and, like, does he like me or not? But Tony was quite, and no, he didn't like me. I think he was quite happy with my attitude and how I played. But quite simply, the way he saw the team at that time, I wasn't going to be a part of that. So I think I appreciate that more now than I maybe did at the time. But it was honest about it, and so yeah, you just need to deal with that. Again, as football, it's very much ups and downs. You need to build a bit of resilience because no matter how good you are, you're going to get stick or you're going to get a knockback or whatever it is along the way. So again, one of the reasons probably why I come back a better player, I had to deal with that resilience, and then I ended up going out on loan actually to Blackpool for 3 months with Simon Grayson, which was great. And if anybody knows a little bit of history about Blackpool, they've not been the soundest club off the field, and that was a bit of a nightmare off the field. I got offered a contract. I thought I was going to sign it there, and actually found out in my honeymoon that had been pulled off the table. So, and it was then at that point that I thought, right, I had to look back at coming back to Scotland.
Obviously, it was a short stint at Blackpool, but even just those few months, how crucial was it for you? You were at least playing again. It was just getting that love of the game, the feel of the game back in your bones.
Yeah, it was, and again, it goes back to what we spoke about right at the start in terms of playing boys' club football. I think in football, sometimes you can get caught up a bit of it being a job, essentially. It is a profession and you get paid for it. And I think players can get lost in that a wee bit and forget like why you actually play the game in the first place, or certainly why you fell in love with the game. And actually, when you've had a little period where you've not been playing and, then you get told, right, you're not part of these plans, and then you do get the chance to go and play, that's what probably maybe ignites you a bit again, and you think, right, actually just enjoy playing football, this is a privilege. So I think that's what Blackpool gave me. Reignited that fire a little bit, and I was actually a little bit sad at the time, to be honest. It never quite worked out there because I did enjoy it. I did enjoy just playing again. League One in England, still a decent level, and I liked everything about the club. As I say, it was a bit mad off the field at Blackpool, to be honest with you. But it was just so enjoyable being back out there playing again.
You speak of your ambitions, obviously, to come back up the road. You do, everybody knows you end up at Motherwell, but it looked kind of likely that you might have been signing for Kilmarnock. Just how close were you to that? And obviously, you trained there for a few weeks.
Probably about 2 hours or something away from signing. It was pretty much
Wow.
that close. Again, bit of a sliding doors moment. So I've been training with Jim Jeffries and Billy Brown. They kindly allowed me to come in, and nothing really on the table to start with. It was just a case of come in and train, see how you get on, and then we'll take it from there. So, I enjoyed that, and then ultimately at the end of a couple of weeks, they did offer me a deal, and I think again, I think the season had started. I think it had a week the first game had gone, so I think it was actually into the season. But anyway, I was in the house, and I think I was pretty much ready to sign for Kilmarnock. I was going to phone Jim and tell him, look, I'm going to come in and sign. And I got a phone call. I got a phone call from Stuart Robertson. It was actually at the time, who was now Rangers MD, but he was Motherwell managing director at the time. And just kind of out the blue, I mean, I had a couple of messages from a couple of Motherwell players at the time to say there might be a possible interest, but nothing ever happened. And I thought, right, it's not happening. I'm just going to sign for Killie. But anyway, I got that call, and it was a case of, right, what's happening? We want to sign you. And as soon as I got that call, it was just like, right, this is what I want. It just felt right. It was like a chance to go back to Motherwell. It was just, I was just done in my head pretty quickly. So, it was a hard phone call to Jim Jeffries, to be honest, because he'd been so good with me, and still got so much respect for him and Billy, to be honest. And he was great with me. I think he understood my kind of connection and affection for the club, and that was it really. And the next day I'm in training back at Motherwell, so pretty whirlwind, and it was pretty close to not happening, but I'm delighted it did.
Absolutely. And did it make it a little bit easier, the fact, obviously, with Motherwell as well, you were walking in and it would be Maurice Malpass as manager, so you knew him, he'd been your assistant manager previously. I'm assuming a lot of the dressing room must have still been roughly the same.
Yeah, it was. There's still a lot of faces, a lot of familiar faces. And that was good. Obviously, just helps you settle in straight away. Obviously knew the manager, as you say, very, very well. So yeah, it was. And again, it was just that thing of playing, just being back in a squad of players, feeling as if you were a big part of things, feeling as if you were there to make a difference. And after my experience at Plymouth, or certainly the last kind of 6 months of that experience, it was just exactly what I needed, So, no, I was delighted to be back. It wasn't the easiest season. I ended up actually getting injured and tearing my cruciate ligament at Inverness away, which is not the best place to tear your cruciate ligament, given the bus journey home. But so again, a season even coming back full of kind of ups and downs, but overall, I was just delighted to be back.
She did. You started that season so well, and for the longevity of your career, an extremely fit and fairly injury free kind of player. So you do obviously suffer that ACL injury up at Inverness in the winter. Can't get much worse than that. Just how tough is that? Like I say, you're not a guy who really experienced any long, hefty injuries.
No, that was the first one really, and made worse, but I am sure my first assessment was have a couple of paracetamol and you'll be okay, because they thought I'd just tweaked, it wasn't actually too bad, but unfortunately on kind of second diagnosis, I was, the cruciate had gone, but no, it was tough. It was tough mentally. Luckily for me at Motherwell with John Porteous, the physio, who had actually recently rehabbed 2 or 3 cruciate injuries, and he was first class in terms of his knowledge, in terms of the surgery and then the rehab that's required, because MD's been through a kind of long rehab like that, 6 months or whatever. It is very repetitive, and it's the early stages of it are really crucial, in terms of getting back and getting back properly. So yeah, John was invaluable to that, and I've got a lot to thank John for. Because after I did come back, I had no kind of further issues with it, for the rest of my career, really. But mentally tough. And I think one thing that's hopefully stood me in good stead now on the coaching side of it and dealing with players that have got long-term injuries, because it's, having gone through that experience there, certainly gave me a kind of an understanding of what it's like to be out for a long-term injury. It is a hard place to be sometimes as a player. So, but yeah, with good support, as I say, you get through it and you push on.
Obviously, you come out at the end of that or the other end of that. I am a little bit further down the line. Just how much of a joy, as from a player's perspective, was it to play the football that was obviously played under Mark McGee?
Yeah, it was a joy. The best football I think I've been involved in, I would say. Maybe not for me exactly personally, but as a team, that's the best football that I've been involved in. Particularly that first 6 months under Mark was pretty special, to be honest. And I think again something I've taken, into my own kind of coaching side of it and moving forward with that is just how optimistic Mark was. I mean, he inherited a team that pretty much was very very close to being relegated the year before, really down in confidence. Little kind of loss of direction almost, doesn't really know what we were, where we were going. And he came in and, his first couple of days, he's telling us we can go to Hearts and win and go to Aberdeen and win and, and take on the Old Firm. And we're kind of sitting in the dressing room looking at each other thinking, is this guy for real here? But, slowly but surely what he was trying to do was just turn around the psychology of the room. I think he knew that we were all feeling a bit sorry for ourselves and the way he managed to do that, one of the toughest pre-seasons I've been through, and we went to Austria pre-season and running round forests at 7 o'clock in the morning, and what felt like from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. But again, we were still relatively young, just probably a group of boys that were just we were looking for something to guide us, and he was the one that was going to do it. So that along with his bits of coaching and how he wanted us to play, it was just a recipe that for us to go out and start the season the way we did was, I'd say, just some of the best football I've been involved in.
That total change of mentality, that you refer to, is that something that you've tried to, bed in and build into your own sort of coaching time?
No, definitely. I think you always do try and take, it's an old cliche thing, but take bits from all your managers that you've played. And, I think you do, but something I always think of Mark is that, he's just a positive guy, to be honest, just always seen, we could go anywhere. I mentioned going away to the Old Firm before, and, Mark would believe that we could win every single game. Didn't matter who we were playing, where we were playing it, how many injuries we had, it was just that incessant, constant, air of optimism about him. And that certainly rubbed off on us as a team, kind of, again, mainly young, impressionable. And, we would have ran through a brick wall for him. So in terms of me getting into coaching, this side of it, it's certainly a learning experience for me in terms of, right, how did he do that? How did he manage to convince us? And, on a daily basis with the type of training sessions they put on and so on and so on. So no, he's definitely somebody I look back on for inspiration, along with, many of the other managers I was lucky enough to play under.
Obviously, you touch upon the unified team spirit that Mark McGee really did manage to create at Motherwell. So how does a team like that, and then obviously with a manager at the helm with such optimism as Mark McGee, how do you deal and overcome and get through together the passing of Phil O'Donnell?
Again, probably the lowest moment I've had, or definitely the lowest
Yeah.
moment I've had at the club, and I think our club's had for, possibly ever, to be honest with you. Again, Mark just showed fantastic leadership in that situation. It's just a real, from a personal point of view, just almost a surreal experience. You can still remember it vividly. The day, after it, getting the news, and it's just still elements of it seem surreal to me, to be honest, thinking about it. But we did through kind of tragedy. It really bound everybody in the club together, and that really air of getting through it together and trying to do our best for Phil's family and represent Phil that season for the rest of that season as well as we could, and so it was a real bonding experience as well. And Mark was really at the heart of that and a real leader in that, so a real difficult, the most difficult moment. But as you said, as a team, we just got through it as best as we could.
You know, the toughest of seasons, the toughest of times. So then to get through that and then to get to where you got to, obviously a third place finish that season, just how much did that mean to the club on a wider scale?
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge. As we talked, as we spoke about, given the season before, we were very close to being relegated. Just that turnaround, and feeling it, the club as a whole, and the sense of pride, especially off the back of Phil's passing as well. It's just such a sense of real achievement and just togetherness at the football club. So it was fantastic. It was great, a great achievement, and something that obviously the club hadn't done for such a number of years, to qualify for Europe. And for us as players looking forward to the following season, it was just so exciting, something totally different. And again, for me personally, something I just never ever thought I'd get the chance to do, is to represent Motherwell in a European competition. So it was just a special season in a number of ways.
Absolutely. I think it's fair to say you had greater European exploits later down the line, so we'll definitely touch on them. But just to get back to that sort of time in your career, what was the very brief sort of stint with Jim Gannon's time at the club like for you? That must have been quite an experience.
That's one way of putting that an experience. It was
Heard a few
a
stories.
different experience. I maybe don't look back at Jim as fondly as I look back at Mark's time, put it that way. But again, I go back to that period under Tony Pulis at Plymouth. That's football. You have periods in your career where you just don't see eye to eye, or they just don't see you as part of the plan for whatever reason. And that was exactly the same under Jim. For not just myself, but some of the more other experienced players that were in the team at that time. We found ourselves surplus to requirements, and again, bit of a sliding doors. It was getting very close to me possibly moving on as well, which when I think about it, looking back to where I am now, is scary for me. Given what the club has meant to me since that time, but difficult. Again, a bit of soul searching, but resilience having to be shown. And fortunately for me, things changed, and Craig and Archie came in, and I managed to get myself back into the team and be a kind of big part of things again. But was I probably a better person for coming through that? Possibly. Possibly you need some of these experiences along the way to actually move forward and become the best you can be. So I still had a lot of respect for Jim in terms of his coaching and the way I went about his tactical side of things, but certainly, I lost respect from pretty quickly in terms of the way he managed people and managed myself. So, swings and roundabouts, I suppose, but again, it's all experience. It was all experience for me.
I say swings and roundabouts, rough with the smooth, and then as you mentioned earlier, Craig Brown and Archie Knox walk through the door. How much did that mean to you, or how much could you really take from them, because they are quite the pair?
They are quite the pair, yes, a fantastic pair in my eyes. And again, you're back to probably Billy Davies being the biggest influence. I think Craig and Archie coming in and that changeover, Jim moving on and then coming in again, is probably the thing that sparked my best part of my career. That from Craig kind of onwards, I think that next kind of 3-4 years is probably personally when I played my best football. And Craig and Archie were a massive part of that. It just probably gave me my belief back, having been kind of out of the team and maybe questioning myself a little bit along the way. And that was Craig's biggest strength, just to manage people and get the best out of them. And it might just be a wee conversation here, or pulling you aside at a certain training session or whatever it may be. He was just a master at doing that. And along with Craig, Archie's knowledge and the odd hairdryer treatment along the way, which were could be pay-per-view, but just a brilliant combination. And again, I think they turned the kind of club around and really started to push it on to another level for those subsequent years.
Just going to ask you, everybody always talks about the role that the manager really does play, and you as the assistant manager, hence why I want to ask you this, just how good was Archie Knox at getting to you on a personal level? Obviously, you mentioned how Craig, you would have the little conversations, but all the knowledge, everything that Archie Knox, the name, brings.
Yeah, as long as you dodge the teacups in between the instructions, you did all right, to be honest. But no, that's actually a misrepresentation of him, to be honest, because listen, he let you know, put it that way, when you maybe weren't doing something right. But on the whole, his training sessions, the way it just, he walked into a room, he just had that instant respect, as you say, where he'd been, what he'd done in the game. Um, and us as a group of players, we just loved working under him. His training was always good, varied, and yeah, he was just so knowledgeable, and a great foil for Craig, actually. In terms of their personalities, they were different, but that's what worked about it. That they were different. Um, and when somebody needed a cuddle, Craig was there to give you a cuddle. When somebody needed a boot up the arse, Craig, Archie gave you the boot up the arse. And it sounds very simplistic, but a lot of leadership, and again, for me, looking back on it, leadership is about that. It's picking out each individual in in that dressing room, and try to figure out on a daily basis who needs what at what time, and Craig and Archie were absolute masters at that.
It wasn't the longest spell at the club for the pair. So, how seamless was the transition or the changeover then into the leadership of Stuart McCall and Kenny Black?
Yeah, I think it was pretty seamless. I think Stuart and Kenny are kind of cut from the same cloth, I think, as Craig and Archie. Kind of just proper football guys is the way I would describe them. And again, Stuart, again, a great man manager, knew how to lead a group of people, keep the mood in the camp right. Him and Kenny. And again, just a good combination. We're hard enough when we need to be hard with you. But, the camaraderie, the team spirit, and all things like that were probably as strong as they ever were, I think, under Stuart and Kenny. What they inherited from Craig and Archie. And then I think Stuart and Kenny then really enhanced that even more, that kind of feeling within the dressing room. And, again, I go back to the Mark McGee 6 months is probably the best football as a team, but just for my own personal football, I think Stuart was probably the manager that got the best out of me. I think I took over the captaincy as well under Stuart, and for me, I think that helped me. I think it came naturally to me. I think I just loved it. I just loved being captain of the club, and that, along with Stuart and Kenny's management and coaching, I think for me personally, just something seemed to click for me, and I just loved it. And as I say, on a personal note, I think it really pushed me on to play the best football I think I'd ever played.
Kind of the golden question. Obviously, everybody wants to know the answer to it because then everybody could implement it. But what did make Stuart McCall so successful during his time at Motherwell?
I think his character. I think you know, again, Stuart is. It'd be great. Great at organising like a night out. Just being the centre of just being. It was just that guy. He was the centre of a bit of banter. If there was a bit of banter about, or if it was a football, he was at the head. He was just at the head of everything. And I just it was the players' mates when he had to be the players' mates. But then when he had to be hard, he had to be hard. Again,
Yes.
it comes back to that. There's no one specific thing. It's just I think a good manager has got a great sense of the room. When they need to be tough, when they need to be a bit of a laugh and a joke. When they need to stick to football and the game plan and how we're going to tactical. And I think Stuart just had that mix pretty much spot on. And for me personally, as I say, taking over the captaincy and probably just giving me the belief that I needed, that I could, now I was a leader in this group. I'd always been a young boy coming through and then cement myself in the team. And it was probably Stuart that really cemented me to say that, look, I want you to be, lead this team and give me that responsibility. And I responded to that. I loved that. And as I said, I think it really pushed me on.
Obviously, for a club like Motherwell, especially, and a guy like yourself who'd been there during the dark days and the tough long nights. So, how monumental was it to make the Scottish Cup final?
Yeah, it was. Unfortunately, the final didn't go too well, but see, getting there. Unfortunately, the final didn't go too well, but I've had the pleasure of being there as a coach now as well, which was which was great. But getting there as a player was, listen, it's go back to that kid growing up watching Everton and out playing in the street. It is a classic sort of dream of
Yeah.
running out of Hampden and playing in Scottish Cup finals and League Cup finals and things like that. So it's a bit of a boyhood dream, and just one of my favourite moments on a pitch actually is the semi-final when we beat St Johnstone. Just kind of we were 3-0 up, I think, pretty
Yeah.
first half anyway, and
Cruising, yeah.
I always remember in that game, one of my most enjoyable, I would say, 5-10 minutes on a football pitch was the last kind of 5-10 minutes of that game, because we knew we'd done it almost. You knew your family was in the stand, the crowd were, rocking. We just all knew we were going to a Scottish Cup final, and just kind of looking about at your teammates on that. And as I say, when there's only 5 minutes left, and you kind of that feeling of right, we've done it, that's pretty special, So that was fantastic. And unfortunately, the final, we just never quite turned up for the final, unfortunately, which can happen. But the experience of walking out there in front of your family is pretty cool.
You say obviously Stuart McCall gave you the captaincy in Motherwell, and you yourself, you do believe that it took your game to that extra level. What sort of responsibility did you take upon yourself though to implement? You'd been the young guy, you'd been there with all the experienced heads. Was that a part of it as well that you took in with your role?
Yeah, I think so. I think you are pretty much a product of your environment. How you've been brought up, how you've seen dressing rooms, how you've seen players lead. And as I said, right, when we're talking about these guys, it was all about example. It wasn't really getting a hold of people by the scruff of the neck and telling them what for. Yeah, there's maybe times probably in game where I would do that, probably rather than in the dressing room. But certainly be vocal on the pitch. But no, it was really more about building a togetherness. I was always pretty big in that in terms of off the pitch, making sure we were out together, socialising together. The wives and girlfriends were socialising together, and building that real togetherness. And again, it was probably one of Stuart's strengths as well, that he really pushed that as well. He pushed us to be as close as possible. And I suppose, but don't want to use the term old school, but that kind of old mentality of work hard, play hard, and
Yeah.
I think done right, I think that can build a real togetherness, a real deep togetherness. And I think, you look at that team, and I think a lot of boys are still in touch in that team, and that's no surprise to me because of how close that we did get. So as the captain, it was really important to me to try and push that as much as I could.
Spoke about Elvis earlier on when Motherwell initially qualified for the Europa League, but obviously it wasn't too long. Champions League qualifier, you're getting to lead the team out. Can you sum that up?
Yeah, it's tough, but yeah, again, just amazing experience. I think we had the Champions League music on it for part, and being a qualifier, I'm not strictly we should have had that music on, but we were going to play it loud.
Rightly
So
so.
walking out to that, that famous music, obviously that we all know was great. And to see Fir Park, the way it was, how just absolutely bouncing, and again your family there, and even the away leg. We played in the Olympic Stadium in Athens, and it wasn't full by any means, but I think anybody that's played or been to football out in Greece, in terms of the atmospheres and things like that, it's just again something pretty special. So, unfortunately, my family managed to fly over for the games and things like that. So it was, you put all that in the mix. It's just a special experience, and to captain a Motherwell team in the Champions League is something that I'll just always cherish, to be honest with you. And again, the game never quite went for us. I think it was actually closer. It was closer than the scoreline suggests, but nothing will take away the actual experience of being involved in it.
What's more special, home or away?
But both for different reasons. I think both. I think the away one. I think the away one probably sticks in my mind a bit more, just because of the venue. Probably, the Olympic Stadium in Athens, and looking out, you obviously have that away section there with the pyro going and everything.
Massive.
Aye, and the great the Panathinaikos fans have got they've got everything going on. I don't know what was going off in their end. Pretty much
Knockheads.
everything. But just that whole experience, I always love what I love. One of the things about European nights as well was the training in the stadium the night before. So we
Right,
went to
yeah.
Olympic Stadium and trained the night before, and I remember, even in between the training sessions and things, a few is just kind of looking at each other and have a wee chat with each other and thinking, this is just awesome. You know what I mean? Just we are training in the Olympic Stadium in Athens. Again, you're just like, this is mad, but brilliant. So I would probably say the away game just probably sticks in my memory a little bit more, to be honest.
There was the consistent, solid success, perhaps even arguably on nights like that, punching above the weight of this expected Motherwell. So when, it becomes apparent that Stuart McCall's going to leave, what are the emotions like at that time? Because it really is signalling the end of that really successful period under his leadership.
That was tough, I think, because it was really tough because we were so close. So back to what I was saying about, I made a point, making a point of being so together, and Stuart was a big part of that. And I think that's probably the closest I've been with a manager. Even as a group of players, there's always been that, the manager and the players. Whereas I think that gap in that period was we were all very together. Stuart, Kenny, and the players were really, really close. So it really hit us really hard. I think that's why it probably hit us harder than probably any other manager leaving was because of that. So that was particularly tough because we'd obviously some real highs on the pitch, but it was probably because, as I said, more to do with we'd grown really so close together.
So it was a tough time, after Stuart left, and it really went from the highest thing to the lowest of lows. How vividly is that, that relegation battle against Rangers still in your mind?
Very vivid. Yeah, it's still. When I think back to it, I spoke about it a couple of times, and it's definitely. I think the games have. I think they went Thursday, Sunday, or something like that. It was only
Yeah.
three days between the games, from memory, but it was the build up. It wasn't actually so much the first game. It was actually because we'd done well in the first game. It was that 3-day period between the two games. I think is the most nervous and I've ever been. It was almost that feeling of like we can only mess this up now, and it was just such a fear of we just want so desperate to get over the line. It was just such an anxious time. I just remember it being, and even that second game itself, being out on the pitch. I always remember looking up at the scoreboard at 11 minutes or something, wishing the time away, and you think, right, there's 80 minutes to go, and I've just looked at the scoreboard. What am I doing? But it was just one of those games you were just wishing the game away. And if you actually go back and I've not went back and watched the whole game, but I'm pretty sure if you went back and watched the game back, we were terrible. Until the second half, until we ended up scoring, and it looks so comfortable. Both games actually look really comfortable. But actually, the first kind of half an hour or 10, 20, half an hour of each game, I think Rangers had 3 or 4 really good chances, and it could have been so different. But certainly in the second game, I think it was a consequence of us just wishing the game away. We were just so desperate to go over the line, and when we did eventually go over the line, it was just nothing other. It wasn't even enjoyment. I can't even remember enjoying it, to be honest. I know the fans certainly did, but as a player, I was just relieved. I remember being in the dressing room after and just sitting there and just wasn't he jumping about? It was just actually sitting there, and again, just drained, almost just drained, relieved, all of that really.
You were obviously the main consistent. There was managerial changes between obviously the success of Stuart McCall and then the relegation battle. So how do you keep that side and your teammates unified? Because that is really the highest of highs to then go into to ultimately the lowest of lows.
Yeah, it was. I think the thing in the playoff games, if you look at our team, we had some good experience in the team by that time. Myself, Stevie Hamill, Stephen Pearson, Scott McDonald, Steve McManus. So I think although we hadn't played done ourselves justice and hadn't played well actually throughout the season. I think when it came just to the 2 one-off games and almost like 2 cup finals, really, I think it was actually good that we had that experience in the team, because I think more than anything in those games, it was about probably not so much playing silky football and the way we were going to go about it. It was just managing the occasions, and it was tough occasions, to go to Ibrox, 50,000 people. It's a tough venue, so it was mentally we had to be so strong. So I think that was a big factor, and yeah, it was disappointing. That's why I'm saying after the second game there was no real elation from us. It was all kind of relief. We were actually a bit embarrassed at the end, in terms of, as you say, going for such a high. At the end of the day, yeah, we beat Rangers over 2 games, which again, I know the fans absolutely loved it. But us as a team, we were a bit embarrassed that we were there anyway. We were actually in that relegation scrap. We knew we'd actually let the fans down, to be honest, most of the season.
Obviously, you survive that. Premiership status is obviously secured, and then you are offered the ultimate honour, really, of having a testimonial at the club that you've spent the majority of your career at. Just how humbling an experience was that?
Yeah, very humbling. Very humbling. It was a great time for me and my family, actually, the game itself, but obviously, there are different events, the dinner and there's golf day and things like that. And again, I think when you go through, certainly from my own experience, you don't really think about what you've achieved at a club, or think about how many games you've played, or how other people maybe perceive you at the club, or see you, the fans. You just kind of get on with it, and it's probably something like that, when the people start turning up to your dinners and turning up to your, the game and things, you think, oh God, this is actually pretty special. This is that people are actually taking time and to recognise you. So it was a brilliant experience. And again, I said before about having shirts up in my house, and I've got 2 shirts, and it's my debut shirt that we spoke about and my testimonial shirt, and because to me it does represent that journey, as a boy that came in off the site, building site, that thought, right, what am I doing here, and then all the way through to then, getting that recognition of, the club granting me a testimonial. So, again, fantastic, something I look back on with real fondness.
Absolutely. So, Mark McGee returns as well. What was the glaring differences, or why do you think that the both spells perhaps differed?
I think both. I think probably because both parties were different. We weren't the club,
Right.
and the dressing room was different to what he inherited, and I think Mark himself just naturally over time is maybe a little bit different. And it just happens. I don't think, I'm saying that it was different, but I just think that's natural. I've moved on. There's been time in between those events, and I think in football it's very hard just to replicate. To bring, right, here's the playbook that we used last time. Here's the way we did it, and right, let's do that again. I think it's different. There's so many things had moved on, and yeah, it just never quite got to the heights that Mark had done before. So. But again, that's football. I think that's sport. I don't think that's just the football or just the Mark McGee thing or a Motherwell thing. I just think it's, you look across history, and I don't think it's easy sometimes for managers to come back and just replicate the success that we had at a club first time round.
Somebody new comes in, obviously, again, and it was Stephen Robinson. Did you know, kind of going into that season, that it would perhaps be your last? Was coaching always kind of on the brink for you?
Maybe a little bit, in terms of, did I know it was going to be my last season?
Right.
You kind of know you're getting on, and did I think I was capable of playing longer? Yeah, I actually had another year's contract, to be honest.
Right.
And I kind of forfeited that, really, to take up the opportunity that Stephen ultimately offered me. But no, I mean, coaching and management is something I've always been. Well, not always, sorry. I was probably mid-20s, 25, 26, I think I was, when I done my first coaching badge, my B licence with SFA, and it was an ambition of mine to get my pro licence, UEFA pro licence, by the time I stopped playing, and I was lucky enough to do that. the year before at Stock. So I was kind of ready to go in terms of my education and the coaching side of it. And yeah, I always seen it as a progression that I wanted to make. So when I did go off to take the chance, it was a big decision, still a big call, because I did feel as if I maybe had one more year in me, to be honest with you. But I just felt as if it was too good an opportunity to turn down. And ultimately that kind of swung it in the balance of finishing my playing and taking on the kind of coaching role.
You make that move then. So what were the challenges perhaps of going from, the dressing room being just one of the guys, one of the teammates, to then having to, inflict that little bit of authority when needed?
Yeah, I was very conscious of that, very conscious. And luckily for me, I think in season that would be really tough to do. But the fact that this happened kind of over a summer, it almost gave me a little bit of time to go away and think about how I was going to deal with that. And I wanted, when I did think about it, I did make a conscious effort when I went back to have a little bit of distance between me and the relationship. I didn't want to just go back and be just, because as an assistant manager, you do have a little bit of license to be closer to the players, obviously, than the
Yeah.
manager does. But I still felt as if I almost wanted to manufacture a bit more space than normal, just initially anyway, because I just wanted it to be almost a line there. And the players were brilliant with that as well, because I think they respected that, they sensed that, and they respected, as I say, me thinking in that way. So I made a point of not being in the dressing room as much, and trying to give the players their own space, and not, which was hard. You're used to walking in a building and turning left straight into the dressing room, and I was kind of having to walk straight on. I was tempted sometimes just to go into the dressing room, but I just kind of forced myself not to, and yeah, just have a little bit of distance. And the other thing was, I wanted to show the players very quickly that I was serious about this side of the game. It wasn't a case of, right, I've just given me a job to give me a job. I wanted to show them, I'm going to make a difference and make them better, and do the job, basically. So I worked hard in terms of, my actual coaching and sessions, and make sure they were right, and so that hopefully the players would then see, right, he's serious about this, and it's not a case of he's here just for a bit of a laugh and a joke, and the manager's going to take all the training. It's like, right, he's going to be part of this training, and be serious about really, being a coach. So no, I think the transition was actually pretty good.
It's something that you mentioned earlier, so I just wanted to bring it back to you. Obviously, you experienced the finals as a player, and now you're experiencing them in the coaching capacity as well. How does that differ, the emotions? Because at the end of the day, you still love Motherwell, you still love football, and there's still that want to win.
Yeah, it is different. There is I think as a player, even as a player, you kind of look after your own wee world. You look after what you've got to execute on the day, who you're playing, your direct opponent, and that kind of role you play within the team. Whereas a coach and a manager, you're thinking about the whole thing. You feel a responsibility for the whole thing. So, which is great when things go well, but when things don't go so well, then I do think you feel that you need to take it harder. It was really interesting to me. I loved it as a coach. I've got to say, I loved it as a player, but I loved it as a coach. And getting to those two cup finals in the one season was brilliant in terms of that real preparation time of preparing for a big game, and preparing the training sessions, preparing how you're going to structure that week in the build up, and all these things. I was fascinated by that, and I loved every minute of it. So it is different. Equally, as I say, great when things go well, and maybe down when things don't go so well. But I think it's that overall sense of responsibility you have for the whole team, and club, essentially, when you're actually in the coaching and management side of things.
Just one final question for you, and it's two players that kind of been under your guidance the last few years that they've got their big moves away. But I just want to touch upon what kind of talents do Scotland really have on their hands here with Alan Campbell and David Turnbull. Obviously, you've seen them more than anyone.
Yeah, listen, two of the best young players in Scotland, in my opinion. Very different. If I take them, one by one, take Alan. Alan for me is just, he's got the best attitude. And, I think back to all the dressing rooms I've been in, all the players we spoke about some of them and how they set examples and things like that. Alan Campbell has the best attitude and level of professionalism to in football that I've ever seen, ever. That is the compliment I would pay him. He is just so serious about being the best he can possibly be, and that is why he's having the success he is. He's now obviously gets moved down to Luton in the English Championship, and I expect him to kick on again because he's so driven, so driven. He's a dying breed, a real kind of battling midfield player and landing in second balls and making tackles and real anticipation of where the ball's going to be. And I just loved working with him. Fantastic attitude, always open to learn, and somebody I think's going to have a real bright future in the game. And then with David, a little bit different to Alan, a lot more technical and probably has more natural ability, football ability. But the thing with David that I love more than anything is his mental approach to the game. Never gets too high, never gets too low, and just his ability to under pressure to perform. I know he's moved to Celtic, and it's no surprise to me that he started the way he did at Celtic, because I don't think he's ever overawed by any situation. The way he handles pressure and occasion, it's just like a game of five-a-sides down the pitch. That football I was talking about, put the jumpers down for the posts. David could be playing in front of 5 people or 50,000 people, and he is just the same guy, same player. So, technically, obviously, fantastic. One of the best young players that I've ever seen technically, as I say, in the way he handles the ball under pressure. And again, somebody for me that's only going to improve as time goes on.
Keith, I can't thank you enough. All the very best with your assignments. We're both in the same boat there, that they're far from enjoyable, and they do come thick and fast. But thank you so much for joining me on Soccer Supernova.